Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Rich. Thanks, Rich.
Am I muted on Zoom or on Twitch?
Thanks,
Am
Rich.
I muted on Zoom or on Twitch?
Thanks,
Am I
Rich.
muted? Yeah, I'm muted on Twitch.
Thanks,
Am I
Rich.
muted? Yeah, I'm muted on Twitch. Am I? Yeah, I'm muted on Twitch. You good? Everything all right? Let me try turning my sound off and then on again. Okay, how about now? Okay. There's always something with us, Johnny boy. Always something. I keep the tab muted, but yeah, I can unmute it. I hear you on the Zoom call. Yeah, weirdly enough, I hear myself coming through the stream, but not you. Are you sure that you're not muted somewhere? It's always the settings. Please excuse our technical difficulties, beloved chat people. We're trying to figure everything out. Yikes. Uh, okay. I'm sure it's very thrilling for our viewers.
All right. Can you hear me now? All right, now I'm coming
I
into the
can
stream.
hear you now. Yes, I
Why?
got it
It's the
after the
dumbest thing.
delay.
Why the heck would Streamlabs nuke everything in an update? That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard in my life.
Who can possibly know how these companies work, John?
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Rich. We would be lost without you.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's like Stream goes through an update and then it just literally wipes everything. Like the whole like I've never seen a system where it's like, oh hey, this is something that's very reliant on you having everything ready to go and preset and all that stuff. We're gonna have an update that nukes all of it and restores some of your settings, but not all of them. It's crazy.
I agree.
Anyway, thank you those of
Deeply
us
live in
who
a
are
society.
watching, anybody who's paying attention. This is World Salad, a bi weekly world building show with Long Island Tabletop. I apologize for getting a bit salty at the beginning, but I am your host, John, and I'm joined accompanied by my co host, Jonah. Good to see
I'm
you,
the other
Jonah. It's been a
guy.
while.
Yeah, it's been about a month because we skipped last show due
Well, it was a
to a
holiday, to be fair.
holiday. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
But also you weren't feeling too good neither, or something like that, I believe. So
Yeah, it was a convenient day for me to feel sick because we were going to cancel anyway.
right, that's fine. Anyway, let's take things from the top. This is a world building show where we basically brainstorm some stuff to be used for a variety of role playing games and whatnot. We're going to come up with some ideas and then kind of just spitball from there. Allow me to pull up the Google Doc. In the meantime, while I'm doing that, Jonah, have you been the last week or so?
I've
Anything
been
new
pretty
with you
good,
role playing?
John.
How about role playing wise? Anything new with you? Any games going on or?
Role playing wise, yeah. So I have my weekly game with some friends from high school that we play over Discord and Roll20. That's been going really well. Um, as I kind of alluded to in the past, I was never too interested in it for like the creative writing or world building, more just hanging out with friends, and that's basically what I've been getting. He, the DM has crafted a pretty interesting setting. It's like his own take on a Nordic clan-based, like northern settlement kind of thing with dashes of political intrigue and all that.
That's
So
cool.
very nice. And last Saturday, I recently got together with my other group where I'm the DM for Into the Odd, and they're something really spicy happened towards the end where a player realized that they had the ability to kind of rewrite someone's memories to an extent, and the party wasn't sure what they should do because they were in a situation where it would be very beneficial to them to just kind of use that to get what they want and then move on. But it raises the question: just because they have that power, should they use it?
Right. No, I get what you're saying.
Yeah. But yeah, John, what about you? What about any games you've been involved in?
My Wednesday campaign has been going strong. My friend Dan's been running it, and it's been in Eberron, and it's been a definitely like a more monster style campaign. Where we're all playing monstrous races
Oh,
that we're
fun.
supposed to be kind of working together towards things. Um, I really like my character concept. I just feel like I haven't had the chance to really explore what he can do.
What's your
But
concept?
he is a goblin monk who is he's a contractor. He is part of a union.
Oh, this is your like goblin plumber or something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
hmm
yeah. Why is he a monk, John?
I figured probably go. Well, one, I like monks. I like to be able to do stuff with their hands and all the improvised weapons and all that stuff.
Uh huh.
And it's also because it's like I wanted to do something that was melee focused, but also like when I was trying to think of like what would make sense for a goblin, there wasn't too many things I could think of. Well, to be fair, we had a Goliath and we had a Minotaur, so we both had very kind of heavy tank sides.
Yeah.
And I didn't want to do magic, and I didn't want to just do another fighter. So I was like, all right, let me pick something that's, at least kind of allows me to play with that kind of stuff, but doesn't, it gives me a little bit of free form to kind of do whatever.
Yeah. It's funny you say that because in the game I'm playing and not running, I wanted to be a spellcaster, and I realized in 5e, because that's the system we're using, I kind of always default to being the warlock, and I thought, why not take something a bit blander and just be a wizard for once?
Mm.
So I'm playing kind of the bog standard high elf wizard, and it's like my first time doing that, which is a weird thing to say, and I'm really enjoying it. Just being someone who's so very much into the idea that he's special because he learned how to use magic, and he's like, one of the only true wizards he's come across in his travels so far.
Right, right.
Yeah.
All right. In the meantime, let's get tonight's show off proper. We do
Yes.
need to go an extra, pretty much an extra 10 minutes. So, oh, you got something to drink. It's really not a bad idea. Let
Yeah.
me.
Shout out to water. Water's kind of pretty important when you're podcasting.
Yeah, no, I definitely need something to drink. Now I'm getting. I was thirsty before, now I'm even more thirstier. Thanks a lot, Jonah. Do
You're
me a
welcome.
favor, and I need you to roll for me. Start with a D8.
Okay, that's gonna be a 3.
We've got buildings and structures. Do me
Oh,
a favor.
all
Roll.
right. That's two in a row on that.
Roll. I was thinking about coming up with more categories for stuff to branch out, but
Yeah. Why don't I just re-roll just to give us
fine.
a bit?
That's fine. 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 Fine.
Okay. 6.
6 is flora fauna.
All right, that sounds fine.
Roll me another D8.
Okay, we got a 1.
That's an NPC.
Okay, so an NPC that is a flora or
No,
fauna,
it's a
or an
flora and
NPC.
fauna that's tied to an NPC. And give me
Okay,
one
okay,
more. Give me one more D8.
that's a 4.
Oddities and unusuals. So
Okay,
there's gonna be strange structures, weird tech, bizarre weather puppets. So we have basically flora or fauna that is tied to an NPC that is definitely on the unusual side.
do we want to roll for genre as well? I recall that being a category or a table.
If you'd like, give me a D6.
Yeah, yeah. That's a 3.
So that would be. I have it just here as modern, which means various time periods. So it could be like up to date or current.
Yeah, my idea with modern was like turn of the 20th century forward, but not so forward that we're starting to go into like sci-fi futurist
Also,
stuff.
why don't we go with urban fantasy?
Big fan of some urban fantasy. Love that. Love urban fantasy.
I've got an idea.
Talk to me, John.
Let's let's
Wait,
try this.
real
Let's.
quick, real
Oh
quick.
God.
Just to for those of you following at home, here's what we're working with. We have flora or fauna tied to an NPC in oddities and unusuals in an urban fantasy kind of moderny setting.
I mean, that all kind of works pretty well because I feel like with urban fantasy, it would. Well, at least we're getting much more on the fantasy side than like a modern take. So it's probably more of like a Dresden Files and less of like a Buffy the Vampire Slayer kind of deal. Is where
Yeah,
that's where my brain is going.
my first thought when hearing oddities and unusuals with flora and fauna, of course, is Little Shop of Horrors. Audrey too. I'm thinking of this like kind of malicious mega flora. That's not what it appears to be.
What about something that's a bit off the beaten path? Like, let's think
All
about
right.
stuff of like, is big plants, crazy creatures. That's always a common kind of occurrence. What's something that could be an urban kind of style creature or whatever that is maybe outside? It's a little bit different. Like, for example, I'm thinking of like I don't know, like a garbage disposal that's alive or something.
If we were doing like more of a technology thing, definitely. Like if it was a tool. But if
Well,
we're
no, I mean,
thinking,
what if it's something that like is it could be mechanical stuff that's brought to life, or it also could
could
very much
be, yeah,
or it also oh hey Dave, it also could very much
Dave.
it could also very much be something that has been around for so long that it's kind of like built into something.
Hmm. So Dave is suggesting like an urban animal, like a raccoon, or maybe even a pigeon. What I was thinking, I think, because I'm a little bit stuck on the flora part, is like a living mold. Because if we want to go off the beaten path but kind of stay true to the setting, I'm thinking of like what's something that's like natural but infectious? Spores. What's a kind of spore or something like that that lives in a city? Mold. Very common, especially in rundown
Yeah, but
buildings.
I feel like that comes up a lot. Like I'm trying to think of like something that like
Hmm.
could be. Yeah, Dave's like ivy going off the side of a building. That's not a bad idea.
It's not.
We're talking about like if we're talking about oddities and unusuals, I'm thinking about something really out there. So like that's why I'm trying to think of
Okay.
something that. that could be unique. Like this might sound dumb, but like what about like I don't know, something along the lines of like trying to think. So it's tied to an NPC. It's something that is it's flora or fauna, and
All
it's
right,
definitely
so
unusual and
so
weird.
so we kind of did this last time where we worked backwards. Where we started with the NPC was tied to, and then figured out what the it was. So do you want to try a similar approach?
What if it's like somebody who like raises these things? Like I'm thinking like getting back to
Yes.
like the Dresden Files thing, like and even funny like when Dave was talking about raccoons, like I'm thinking about like somebody who like in the um somebody in like a fantasy setting who kind of like corrals like like dire raccoons.
Okay, go with me on this. Have you ever seen the Netflix show Big Mouth?
I've not seen it, but I know of it.
Okay, the reason I say it is because in the show, one of the characters has an older brother who basically has an army of trained raccoons. And they cater events, they do stealth missions. It's kind of insane, but going off what you said, I think it would be awesome to have like, yeah, not necessarily like one single entity or like a mold or an ivy, but like a pack or
Like a
a group
flock.
of like, yeah, a flock of like not quite sentient but definitely unusual like street animals.
Almost like a pack, because then when you say
Yeah.
like when you say something like that, it doesn't necessarily need to just be raccoons. It could be like, oh man, what do we go like we flip it around and you do like a like an urban fantasy Doctor Doolittle, like somebody who like some dude who's like a hermit who lives in like Central Park, who like corrals all the kinds of like crazy stuff. Or okay, hold on, you know that thing about like how people talk about abandoning like wild animals to like the sewers and stuff, like flushing gators and turtles and things like that?
Yeah.
So what if you have like a subterranean like sewer dwelling pack of like I don't know like city alligators
I
wrangled by
I'm
like one dude or something like that?
I'm glad you said alligators so that we're not completely ripping off Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
No, not
Like,
turtles. I like something that's not small because it's also a common thing too. People tend to get rid of people tend to get rid of gators because they grow into a very hard to maintain creature or pet.
yeah.
So, or snakes. A common thing is snakes. People and snakes tend to live for a very long time.
Well, maybe in, instead of it just being one fauna, because I think we're leading on like an animal. What if, and part of what makes it unusual is the fact that it's like a conglomeration of different species kind of
Well, I was saying
working
that before.
together.
Like you have
Yeah,
like a
yeah,
pack.
I, I kind of like the idea that it's like a representative of each species in the city almost. That like it's like what if a cult but animals?
To what extent? Like, what would they like? What's their goal? What's their aims? Like, what are they about? Like, if we're building, let's say, like a campaign, and this is somebody, like a group that the party might interact with, either as like a threat or as something that they just run
Hmm.
into. A
I
breed of
was think
a mix of dogs and cats.
a breed of a new animal of mixing. Crossbreeding could be a pretty cool way of going about that, and I think we can definitely explore it. But to kind of explain what I was getting at, it's like every animal has like its own territory in the city and its own like set of responsibilities for keeping the city running. Like, oh, the raccoons have to like go through the dumpster for their food. The pigeons have to like go for crumbs and on rooftops.
So
Like
you're talking
rats.
you're talking about like a urban fantasy version of Root, where it's like like here's the
more
raccoons, here's the
more
pigeons.
more cooperative, less trying to murder each other. But yes, that's kind of exactly what I'm getting at. I'm realizing
All right, so I mean, well,
it's like a city council of all of the animals in the city.
it's like the Rescuers.
Sure. I've never seen the rescuers, but I'm gonna go with you because you sounded confident.
It's a bunch of like rescue rangers, where it's like like a weird assortment of small rodents that like, well, okay, so like
So like mouse guard, like what Davis
well,
said
that's
in
what
the
Davis said.
chat.
Yeah, but that's just mice. But I mean, yeah, but I get it. Like you could
But
have
it's
it.
okay, like mouse guard, not exactly mouse guard.
What about you go something? So we're talking about unusual. Let's getting back to that whole thing. Something
I
that's really off the
I
beaten
think a
path.
city, I think an underground city council of semi-sentient animals is pretty unusual, John.
What about like a creature that doesn't belong, that like is somehow in the city, like but still somewhat like undetected?
You mean
Like
like a half cat, half dog?
no, more like something really unusual that's managed to kind of like stay off the beaten path, like something like a gorilla. You know what I mean? Like it's
Okay.
around. It's consisted on like scraps of food and whatever it can get by, but it's just secretive enough that nobody's managed to kind of spot it.
Hmm. So this is unusual in a more mundane sense, where it's like it's just out of place.
Right. It doesn't even necessarily need to be a gorilla. We could reshape it into something else. I mean, with flora and fauna, if you want to go fantasy, you could kind of keep stacking it up. Like if you want to take it on, let's say, a literal D&D version, just take a D&D creature that wouldn't belong in an urban setting, and boom, there you go. Like
Yeah.
like let's say for example, like a street cop, like one of those like cops on horseback that's actually a centaur. He just has the setup where he has the fake little legs.
Yeah, that's got to be like one of the most common riffs, but I still like it. Oh, more suggestions from Dave. A black ooze that lives in the sewers and comes out of the water lines to hunt. That is both unusual and odd and terrifying.
And if you have an NPC, it could be somebody that's either tracking the thing down or somebody who's like corralling it, of like, navigating like pipes and shut off valves and whatever to kind of like
Yeah,
steer it towards a certain direction.
it could very well be someone from like the water authority who's just like, all right, I've been tracking this slime for my whole career, and now I think I can finally like corner it and get it out of our
Or
system.
or it even could be that it's something of like a condemned building where it lives in the pipes. The pipes are shut off from the rest of the main water system, possibly intentionally, possibly unintentionally, and it's like yeah, like there's um, people who try to maybe like keep people out, and they use this ooze to kind of spook or scare away anybody who gets too close. Or it's like somebody figured out what was going on and is just squatting on the land. They don't mind if homeless people come by because it's not going to bother them. But if this thing gets out and they find out that they screwed up, then they could be liable for whatever happened.
Right.
So that could be that.
So, yeah, so I think we have three strong ideas, and we can start kind of narrowing our focus in on one of them. So I think the black ooze thing kind of resonated with us. So thanks, Dave. And then of course there's your idea about the out of place animal. And then I'd like to fight for this secret underground council of animals.
I mean, it's fine. I guess the question is you'd have to ask with that is one, how intelligent? Like, are they intelligent for animals, or they actually have like a human level of intelligence?
I
Um,
was thinking they're intelligent by animal standards, not that they're like, not that they can speak or write or understand human language.
Right. It's just like this unspoken kind of like communication that they're capable of that allows them
Hmm.
to kind of draw lines where it's like, yeah, there's not really a whole lot of cats around here that you'd think that there are,
Yeah, yeah.
but then like I guess to what end? Like, what are they?
Well, my whole idea behind them was like they're the secret cabal that keeps the city running the way it's supposed to, quote unquote. Like they're the reason why there's a cat in every bodega and why there's a rat in every apartment building.
I mean, it could be that there's other kind of monsters that, let's say, that normal quote unquote creatures keep at bay.
Yeah.
Kind of go like a mythological setting of how, like you said, like cats are used as like wards for certain things, or
Hmm.
they keep away mice. At the same time, birds keep away certain vermin. Um,
Yeah. And the raccoons keep the streets clean because they're constantly patrolling at night.
I mean, if you want to go off of that logic, you could totally do it where you do like some weird, urban situation where there's like I don't know, like a you do one of those easy things where there's a world just underneath the surface where things kind of
Hmm.
occasionally creep out, and animals, because they have like this weird sixth sense that humans aren't capable of, they're more aware of it. So it's like, the party members, maybe they pick up it because they notice that their pets are acting a little bit unusual or more
Yeah,
unusual than usual. Or it could be that
and
you
yeah,
move into the city, and like where you move into, you notice that there's these things, and then as they interact, then that kind of leads to other things. Because then with the NPC, you could have somebody who is aware, who kind of straddles the line between knowing
mhm.
what the other world is like and what this world is like, whether
Yeah.
they
I think
and
with
what the
that you
reason
can.
for them to do so.
Yeah, I think with that NPC you can kind of go with like the classic homeless person that can see a bit too much, but no one believes them until they've
Doesn't even
already
need, like, you
crossed
don't
the
even need to
threshold.
go that, like, I'd say go with something a little bit more on go with something a little bit less obvious, but just as easy to develop. You do like a city planner, or somebody
Oh,
who, like I
sure.
said, like a maintenance worker who's like, look, like there's a reason why, a sanitation worker, a garbage man,
Hmm.
that could be another thing of like they keep the
Oh,
streets
yeah.
clean and they're aware of what's going on, and at the same time, um, if let's say maybe there's something that somehow brings trash to life, and like it's gotten really bad because littering and trash is becoming so prevalent that,
Hmm.
like, it's they're really trying to keep things down, but at the same time, um, just because of just like that's an interesting approach where you could do like a.
Yeah. And we could even work like the black ooze into this, where it could be like the
It could be some
main
kind of, yeah, it
force
could be some
of
kind of.
like, yeah, yeah, like the main force of the like mythical evilness beneath the city takes the form of this like viscous black
It's
ooze
not even
trying
that it's
to.
not even that it's evil. It could just very
Right.
well be that it's
It's
this
just a
other.
different kind of animal that
Right.
can't
It's just a matter of
comprehend.
like it usually would, like, it usually would survive in trash. They've gotten. It could be that, like, things nowadays are both a lot more disposable, but not a, but don't break down as much. So it's the idea that, like, like plastics and bags and things like that. I mean, I know things are getting better, but there's still a lot of stuff that we just throw out because we don't take the effort to recycle. So
Yeah.
as a result, like, yeah, there's these things that happen to kind of straddle the line between, the normal surface world and whatever this other place might be,
Hmm.
that, it has a way of, like, reanimating broken TV sets, or making like boom boxes, make music that's otherworldly and weird at the same time, you
Yeah.
know. And then, like, yeah, you have the sanitation worker or workers who are like, yeah, we keep the streets clean, the animals know what's up, and yet, there's this thing out there that if we aren't careful, it's going to get out of control. I need to grab
Hmm.
something to drink really quick if you want to just
Yeah.
hold the line.
I'm gonna damp for a little bit. So to go off of what John said and to kind of tie into a little bit of what I was establishing as well with this like cabal of animals, they are smart for animals, but not smart for humans. And similarly, they are maybe powerful for animals, but not powerful by human standards, which means they can do a lot of like damage control and minimization, but this still leaves a lot of room for the party to take up arms, heed the call, and try and take on the real threat. Plus, I because we're in a more urban fantasy setting than a proper fantasy setting, I like to find ways to keep things a bit more grounded when they're close to the players. Like I'm not really a fan of the idea of like, oh, this cat that I've had for 5 years is actually a super intelligent demigod that's been keeping this town. It's the only thing keeping my city from being crushed by the forces of evil. It's like, no, your cat is just a decently smart cat that is working with the birds, the rats, the raccoons, the mice, the rabbits to just keep things flowing. And now that they know, they're aware that there's something especially trying to creep in and invade, now they're just more on their guard.
Yeah, no, I kind of like. I think it's a neat idea because I think it's also a good way to, incorporate creatures more into the campaign. Like, you could basically like give a lot of, like, let's say if you were doing like an urban campaign,
Yeah.
and you need to have a lot of things that might normally be like, a quote unquote magic kind of thing. You can instead just say, well, like, like perception or whatever. Like a lot of this stuff is delegated to the animals or whatever.
Yeah.
Let's maybe segue into one of the other ideas of the,
Oh, also, sorry, just real quick. This is also a very interesting hook for introducing a player to the campaign. Like, because in an urban fantasy setting, if you're like trying to do a D&D hack or something, it can be kind of hard to explain why a character is now an adventurer or trying to be a hero. Here's something: your pet's been part of the secret cabal for its entire life, and
well, I
through
think I think maybe a better way to do that would be, if you're going to do something like that. I think what you'd have to do is you have a couple of players who are in on it, and then other people who are new to the area. You
yeah,
do that to traditional fish out of water. So
mhm,
it's like you have, you know, maybe one person who, like, a couple of people who've been living in the city, and they maybe don't know what's going on, or they know that they know things are a little bit weird. One person who's completely alien to the whole situation, not in a literal sense, but figuratively,
yeah,
who kind of stumbles into things, and then yeah, you go in that angle.
hmm,
And
yeah,
that way,
cool,
at least, like, you have like, all right, it's not so much that everybody has roles, but everybody has certain levels of knowledge that they bring to the table, and then they kind of fit in for those positions that way.
yeah. So, John, what were you gonna say before I so rudely interrupted you?
No, I was gonna say, why don't we go back and redevelop one of the other ideas that we were kind of kicking around? Because I
Yeah,
think
totally.
so, like, something that's a creature that's definitely out of ordinary, or, like, let's say out of place. I mean, if you go too fantasy, I think that's a little bit too. Um, I feel like it's as ironic as this might sound. I think the more fantasy you get, um, the more tropey you kind of fall into, of just
Yeah.
like, oh, like, it's a dragon, or whatever. So I'd like the idea of something that just doesn't fit. That's, like I said, like a gorilla operating around, and, like, this might sound dumb, but the idea that popped into my head was: have you ever heard of Trash Ape?
No, I have not.
All right, have you ever heard of Heathcliff?
No.
Okay, yeah, Heathcliff is the other cartoon orange cat who is in comics and had a TV show, but not as popular as Garfield. And apparently, in the Heathcliff comics, there's a thing called the Trash Ape, which is just some weird gorilla that kind of travels around the city, like digging in people's garbage for food.
Huh.
It's an actual thing. If you Google Trash Ape,
Yeah. Heathcliff Trash Ape.
oh, I'm sorry, the Garbage Ape.
Cats rejoice as the garbage. Cats rejoice at the garbage apes approach.
Because it just basically just bangs garbage and stuff around, and, like, and there's food or whatever. The point is that something like that, of, like, just take something that's unusual and kind of slap it in the middle of the city, and the question is, like, well, why is this thing here? Because then that could lead into something else, of, like, all right, if you want to go in a different direction, like, hey, there's these parts of the city that lead to somewhere that's completely different, or maybe there's something in the city where, like, the actual creature isn't really a creature. Maybe it's, you do like a night at the museum kind of deal, of, like,
Yeah.
maybe there are wax statues that are coming to life, or maybe there's a zoo, and the zoo is actually all just toys. Like, there's maybe like a magical toy box that comes to life. So there's, like,
Yeah.
like a dinosaur.
What if it's a bit less conspicuous than a gorilla? Because in my mind, I'm like, this shouldn't be something that's obvious to normal people,
Well, I think it's got to be
even though it
so
stands out.
unusual. It's that kind of thing that, like, think about it in movies. When you have something like that that's so over the top, it's funny because nobody seems to notice it because it stands out so much. It's like, I don't know whether it's like people
Yeah.
intentionally, like, blocking it out, or just like nobody paying attention to something that unusual, so it kind of manages to kind of skirt by the radar. You know what I mean? So like you go, the crazier you go, the more grounded I think you have to. Because like you're not going to be like, oh, you're walking down the street and all of a sudden like 15 people are like, oh, there's a gorilla. Like ah, no, it's got to be something of like, hey, does anybody else just see like I don't know like that triceratops just walking down? It's like, what are you talking about? That don't be crazy, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, granted, that's very big, so. Um, well, it's like, what would you do? Taking that concept of something that can exist but shouldn't exist in this setting, like what would you go with?
I cannot shake the first thing that came to mind, which is an armadillo.
An armadillo.
An armadillo.
I mean, it's unusual, but I mean, like people could have it as a pet. Like I don't like what makes that scream high fantasy, like urban fantasy to you?
Um,
You
I
know what I mean? Like what? Like
yeah. I
I
mean, I don't know. I don't know what about a gorilla screams urban fantasy to me either.
well, it's just because the idea, like, you're not gonna like. Okay, if most people don't own gorillas as pets, and also like if you go to certain parts of the country, it's very unlikely for you to just stumble on a gorilla. You know, like I mean, granted, you could argue about any primates in the United States. Maybe if you
Yeah.
go further south,
What about
you know,
a panda?
just a panda
Yeah.
walking around in
Just
Manhattan.
just one panda that always seems to have a fresh piece of bamboo in its paw.
I mean, I think it's unusual. I mean, like, what's the angle?
The angle. So
Don't forget, you got
pandas.
to. Don't forget, it's got to be a very unusual. Well, don't forget one of the things to work with is very unusual, and also the what you call it, the an NPC is some way to kind of tie it around.
Yeah. So I haven't figured out the NPC yet. My thought on the panda. Pandas as animals are incredibly inefficient because they only eat bamboo,
Hmm.
and bamboo is a terrible source of food, source of like fuel. So they have to eat like pounds and pounds and pounds of bamboo to the point where all they do in a day is eat, sleep, find food. This panda, with its seemingly self-replenishing stick of bamboo, could act as a harbinger of nature trying to reclaim this city.
Okay.
And the NPC could just be, a grunt level like environmental activist who's been like, we're polluting the world. This is the only place we have to live on. We have all this plastic and microplastics, and seals are dying. Like, we need to give up this land and give up our way of life to like give it back to the animals and give it back to the plants.
Hmm.
I feel like you're not sold, and I get it.
No, I mean,
I'm not super sold on it either.
well, so like, okay, like let's think of it in this perspective.
Hmm.
You're making a campaign, or you're making like a like a seasonal game session for your friends, and it's like, okay, I want to have something where this could be a hook. It doesn't necessarily need to be the major hook, but this is definitely a part of it. Now, if we like wanted to go with, let's say, some of the ideas we've touched upon before, like let's say the Black Ooze, you could go with a urban fantasy slash kind of like like a light horror of like, okay, there's right, something got loose in the sewers, and there's maybe like one sanitation worker who like nobody believes him, but like he's been trying to ward this thing off, and there's the party. You easily do that of just like, all right, you all collectively move into this one building, and you have your individual settings where you meet this thing, where you start coming together, and then it's like, all right, like it starts of like, oh, granted, you have to kind of figure out how to do the fantasy of it, but like think of it like a movie, of like, okay, everybody has their own encounter with the monster. Everybody starts coming together, and then you start ramping it up, where this thing starts, maybe it starts, getting bigger and bigger, and then things start coming out of this ooze. So it's not
Yeah.
just that it's eating people, but now it's like, oh, hey, this thing is like spreading with like these weird, tar monsters, or it could be that this thing is just one unusual. Like it could work for like a monster of the week kind of deal, where like you do this thing and then you then
Yeah.
segue into another unusual thing that just so happened to be, in this place. But like you need to have some way of connecting them all together. Even let's say like the unusual thing like the gorilla, it's like, well, like I said, I think something could be that like the party stumbles upon like an antique shop with a toy chest that happens to bring things to life, and each time, like
Okay.
every each session could be something new fell into the toy box. So one week it's aliens, another week it's a gorilla, a dinosaur, and it's like, like yeah, people maybe not believe them, especially when like it's like, all right, well, if if people find out about this, maybe they'll steal it or who knows what.
Yeah, because the implications there are huge if whatever inanimate object goes into it comes out big and animated the next day.
Could be that the NPC is the guy who runs the place. Is like, look, there's a curse on this thing. If this leaves the building, you know what I mean? Like, it's very bad. So things that go
Hmm.
into the toy chest can leave the building, but the toy chest itself cannot. If it does,
Right.
the entire building will collapse, and the antique shop is just on the ground floor of what is now multiple apartment buildings. Well,
Yeah.
multiple
Multiple
apartments.
floors of an apartment building. Yeah,
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah. I got you. Yeah, because that represents a huge moralistic choice of like, this item is not good to have around, but if you try and get rid of it, you're putting hundreds of lives
Well,
into
it's not
danger,
even,
if not
no,
killing it
it's not even
outright.
if you want to get rid of it. You can't get rid of it. If you move it out of the place, like something bad will happen. And it could be, maybe there was a good reason for why that was. Like you could say, well, hundreds and hundreds of years ago, it was, there was a ward put in place so that it could never be stolen from the good people who, like, think about it. It could be something of like, this was a gift from like fair folk as a way of like, like you could put, scarecrows and they'll have something to
Hmm.
tend the fields and whatever. And it's like, yeah, if this thing ever leaves the warning where this thing was centered on, and it could just been, well, how did nobody know about it or what happened? It could have been buried. It could have been that they're like, all right, we need to. Like maybe there was like a smallpox outbreak or something of like, look, we
Could have
need to
been.
leave, but we can't leave this thing unguarded, so we're gonna bury this thing, and then it gets dug up, and then maybe becomes part of like a department store thing, and then the
Okay.
department store goes out of business, but they leave it around, and then like eventually it makes its way into whoever owns the place now, and then it's like it could even be that it has a bunch of stuff in it. It's just if you figure out how the logic comes later. You know what I mean? You come up with the
Yeah,
general
yeah.
idea of like, okay, things that go into the chest then come out alive, and they just happen to get bigger, or at least they get to the realistic size of whatever it was that was put in there in the first place.
I mean, this chest sounds really cool, and I know you've developed it a lot just now, but it's neither flora nor fauna.
Well, I mean, it works off the idea of like there could be creature, flora, or fauna that goes into it that comes out. Like you could put like somebody could put a plant
Yeah.
inside it, and then they take the plant out. You could have one of those like, you ever see one of those singing sunflowers? It's like it's like one of the
Yeah.
flowers where it plays the music and it.
Mhm.
So like yeah, you put one of those in there. Now you have this giant singing, talking Audrey 2 plant of like. It just wants sunlight because we want sunlight and music because that's how it lives. But meanwhile, it's like if this thing makes it outside and people start noticing it, it's like even if people do find out, it could be that it's just, you know, it's the idea that like even if people uncover these things, you don't want to have it traced back to
Hmm.
whatever.
Yeah. So in my mind, just to tie it with the theme, like we pick one of the boxes, like augmentations or creations, to be like the hook or the thing that satisfies the criteria. And then if we go into that creation's backstory, we say, oh, it was created from this cursed mystical box that has these properties.
Right.
Because then the initial focus is on something that satisfies our prompt, the thing that we're trying to work for. But then we also have this really cool thing to back it up to really inspire further adventures.
Like I'm just trying to think if there's any other thing to kind of go off of.
I mean, we could go back to one of Dave's earlier ideas about like hybrid. breeds, like taking two species that don't normally go together and having some kind of unholy amalgamation of the two of them.
I wouldn't necessarily say unholy, just a matter of like a lot of stubbornness and crossbreeding.
So the cartoon cat dog was fine, but if I had to imagine a literal cat dog, I don't want to do that.
Well, like, what is something realistically that could you know, merge together realistically? Well, not even realistically, but like something that would make sense.
cat. The sad thing is, cat dog to me it does sound sufficiently plausible. I just don't want to think about how that works or what it is.
Right.
Like, I mean, I can totally imagine a Chihuahua and a regular house cat. Something happening there.
What if or like you do something again? You do. It's got to be like okay. It's unusual enough as it is, but I think it also has to be something where I don't know. If you just had some dude, like some weird scientist dude, crossbreeding animals, that'd be a little bit too weird. But I mean,
Yeah.
like, I don't know. Maybe if it was something that like inadvertently mixed things together, of like, hey, I created this fancy glass, and what the glass does is that like, if two things are caught in the reflection of the glass, it creates something that somehow combines them together.
Yeah, but again, like the box, the special thing is the glass, not the thing it's creating. You know, if we wanted to go for a true fish out of water experience, we could like say, oh yeah,
Well, so
session
okay.
zero
Well,
or
then
like
so
first minute of the session is all these characters moving to this city for one reason or another, and the thing you notice right away is instead of there being rats and pigeons, there are just little mice things with wings that fly.
so I mean, like, and I get like if we're talking about it as a fantasy side, we don't necessarily need to define it that much. But I mean, where would you say, um, like how are these things coming about of dog head and goblin body?
How are these things coming about? That could very well be a mystery that the players have to solve, or we could just accept that as a truism of the setting. Like, one thing I've come to appreciate in some settings, in some worlds, is that they don't actually need to explain things that are just background or axiomatic. They can just say, yeah, like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, we don't need to say why there are lion turtles or like dog hyenas or whatever fun, fantastic stuff they have. It's just accepted that in this world they have hybrid animals. Why can't it be just a truism of this setting that we have ratbirds?
I mean, I guess, and you could say like, okay, like each person in the campaign could come up with, and it doesn't have to necessarily be like it doesn't need to be a part of the campaign. I know we were kind of talking about some of the ideas, but like it doesn't necessarily have to be the defining point of it. It could just be something, different.
Yeah,
Um,
because not every idea in a setting has to be monumental and like important to whatever kind of plot you're developing. Sometimes you just want details to make the world feel lived in.
right,
Yeah, like in Futurama, owls are what rats are for modern day New York.
right.
I'm sure they explain it, but it doesn't matter because it's funny and it's there and it's in the background enough where you remember to chuckle at it every now and again.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. Like you could have it where each party member gets to just mash two things together.
Yeah, yeah. Like talk about like getting your players involved in world building. Like it's a great little thing just to be like, oh yeah, and by the way, over the corner you see a rat swooping down to take someone's cheese off their plate, or you see like a cat jumping out of the water with its frog legs.
I made a spider turtle.
That oh my god, that sounds horrifying.
Just it's by spiders that are the size of box turtles, with a thick armory carpet carapace. Try shaking that away with a broom, and and also they're just as non-violent. It's just people are way more horrifying because one, they can't spook them away as much.
Yeah. Because they're gigantic and they're heavily armored.
Well, I guess like what would they eat then though? If you don't want to make them that they're as intimidating, unless they have to. Oh, they also have to
They
eat
eat
something
the
else that's
rat
just
birds, John. Why
right.
would they eat anything other than the rat birds?
Just imagine just like 8 legs, really slow, and then like the mouth just.
I saw a picture the other day of, an ant that was like blown up to realistic, a super like close up
I
version
don't
of
think
an
I want to
ant's
know where this
face.
rest of that conversation goes.
It's scary.
Yeah,
It's the
ants are
face of
fucking terrifying.
nightmares.
Have you seen Honey I Shrunk the Kids?
Of course I haven't, John. I meant to. I really meant to when I was younger to watch it, but I just didn't. I did, however, watch the Disney Channel TV show based on the movie.
Yeah, but they
Honey, I
didn't
Shrunk
have
the
giant
Kids.
ants though.
No, no, they didn't.
The movie
They
had
didn't.
even worse than the giant. Like, well, no, the giant ant was actually friendly. It was the giant scorpion that like he was really messed up. But even still, like it's just this giant, huge. Yes, there's a giant scorpion in the movie. It's horrifying. Anyway, the point is that yeah, an armored a spider that's the size of a house pet would be horrifying.
Yeah.
Especially because people would keep them as pets. You'd have that one dude who's like, oh man, imagine the beleaguered pet shop owner who's like,
And
oh,
that's who the NPC is. The NPC is the pet shop owner who is selling all of these crazy ass hybrid animals.
that are in such a world, things that aren't hybrids are truly unusual. Oh, what
Yeah.
is this? Oh, that's it's a floofers. It's a fish dog, but it doesn't have the fish parts. I know, weird, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Look at this insane thing. Like it's completely makes no sense whatsoever. It's called a hamster. It's small. It has no defensive capabilities. It burrows around in straw, and it just rolls around all the time. Look,
And
watch
he
this.
just
Look, look,
looks
look, look at it.
incredibly nervous.
Like it's running on that wheel. Like the wheel's not going anywhere. It's not actually doing anything.
Yeah, weird. When I play with my frog cat, it's like attacking things. This is just happy to run on a wheel all day.
Or my oh god.
Yeah, so I like both of these ideas, what we've kind of stuck to. The cabal of animals that are defending the city from extra dimensional horrors, and just the city full of hybridized animals that don't make sense but don't have to.
Right. But I mean, like, yeah, I think either way, like, it all could work out. It's just a matter of
Definitely. It kind of depends on what tone you want your game to have.
yeah,
Like, if you want, like, background comedy, the hybrid animals is just a chef's kiss, ace in the hole. Like, you're gonna fire off with those. But if you want something a tiny bit grittier and more grounded, you can go with the Secret Cabal.
right. And then yeah, just depending on what you want to. I mean, you could do it. You could even do both. Like you could easily just like flip it around and like incorporate multiple things. Where like yeah, you have these weird combined animals which are unusual,
Hmm.
but everyone thinks that they're just animals, but um,
They're the
they
secret
they just
defenders of New York
right
City.
they actually have like a greater purpose than most people realize.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like I say this at the end of every show, but, I really want to start including these things in the games that I run, because they're good. They sound cool to
So
me.
why don't you?
I mean,
I
I
want to.
can.
I want to hear like in the like next time we have a night. I definitely want to hear what you did for spider turtles.
Yeah, I think my wizard, despite being an abjuration specialist, is going to make it his secret mission to just magically crossbreed and hybridize animals, and starting with the spider turtle.
Just sounds horrifying.
I think this is the fast track to make him a supervillain, but yeah.
But all right, yeah.
Yeah,
Anything else
any
that comes to mind, or anything else we can think of? We got a little bit because I know we said we
we
were going to go
started
maybe a
late,
little
so
bit
we
over,
should.
so we're thinking about maybe going a little bit
Yeah.
over.
Um,
Anything that comes to mind?
I guess like kind of as a note, the, your setting really matters a lot when you're working through these prompts. And like for example, if we had gone full on fantasy, I feel like we would have been much more judicious with traditional mythical creatures or like sentient plants or things like that. But because we went with urban fantasy, we took things that we knew and were familiar to us and twisted them a little bit to make them a bit more fantastical. Like, you, of course, if you're doing this at home, can feel free to say, like, yeah, there's a secret cabal of unicorns and gremlins and all that stuff underneath New York City that keeps running and protects it from bad things. But at that point, you might be mixing genres a bit too much, or you might be taking your campaign in a different direction than you had intended, which of course can be okay, but it's always important to be mindful of the decisions you're making as you're setting things up because your world needs to feel cohesive, ultimately.
Right. But well, yeah, because the big thing about all this is that you want to make sure that if you are going to do stuff like this, it has to at least like that's the thing I was saying. Like if you like a lot of like you like getting back to urban fantasy, a lot of the easy ways to go is just take an urban setting and just throw a lot of mythological stuff to it. If it's just like, oh well, it's fantastical, so it doesn't have to make sense. But it's like, yeah, but like it'd be interesting or cool if you kind of spice it up a bit of like saying, well, no, like this setting, would have some. I mean, I guess like urban fantasy is the idea that like the average person might not know the fantasy that's there, so you have to
Hmm.
kind of like balance it out over how unusual would this be or not, or what if, like you said, what if one of the things you did was one day you wake up and all these mythological things are around and everybody else treated it as normal, but you and a select number of people know that that's not the case,
Yeah.
and you just can't, trying to figure it out.
Yeah, and that's a great hook to go with. But again, it at that point you're going a little bit off of urban. Like you're still urban fantasy, but you're leaning a lot more into the fantasy than into the urban.
Well,
Which again,
you're doing it
totally
in an
fine.
urban setting. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, yeah. So I think I guess what I'm trying to say is when you're working within a genre that's already somewhat hybridized, like urban fantasy, it's hard to have an exact 50-50 split of both urban and fantasy. So you do need to pick which side you're going to lean into a little bit more. And as long as you stick to that, whichever way you pick, you're going to have a lot more success making things feel believable.
right, right. But all right, I think we kind of wrapped up enough for today.
Yeah, I'm very satisfied with the two ideas we came across, and I don't think I have anything else to say about them.
Yep. So we will be back then in 2 weeks, which would be March 15th.
15th, yep. It's
We'll come.
very easy when your show's on the first of the month.
Yeah, no, very easy. And then that means we have one more show in March on the 29th.
29.
So we get 3 shows this month.
Yeah.
Well, 3 shows for March.
Yeah, this month. Yeah.
All right. So I'm John, again, talking to you for Long Island Tabletop. I've been joined by Jonah. This
Hello.
has been World Salad, and join us for the rest of our shows on the Long Island Tabletop Network. We have Wednesday morning, Friday morning, we have Over Coffee, and this Friday is basically D&D. And if Doug is around, we'll be doing Watch Paint Dry on Thursdays. So thanks everyone to join us. Please feel free to catch some of those shows, like, follow us, and subscribe. And enjoy the rest of your night.
Be good to each other.